Hello, RotoBallers. Happy Turkey Day. Happy Black Friday. Happy football weekend as 5 straight days of football are on our plates here for week number 12. That means I have your week 12 starts and sits at the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end position. So make sure you got your stretchy pants on for this week's show. Let's kick things off at the quarterback position. This week's must start is Colts quarterback Gardner Minshew against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last week, Brock Purdy had a perfect quarterback rating on his way to a 32-point fantasy performance, completing 21 of 25 passes for 333 yards and 3 touchdowns. Heading into this contest, the Buccaneers are allowing over 22 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position over the last 4 weeks, which includes more than 1,243 passing yards and 7 touchdowns. Minshew has 2 300-yard games this season. This will be his third. Also, you can start Dak Prescott against the Washington Commanders, who are allowing more than 20 fantasy points per game this season and more than 21 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to opposing quarterbacks. Even Tommy DeVito threw 3 touchdown passes against his Commanders secondary. Prescott is third in passing touchdowns this season and happens to be PFF's highest graded quarterback. You're also starting your studs, but you're also looking at Derek Carr as another solid option against the Falcons team, who are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. How about quarterbacks I'm sitting this week? Sam Howell against the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys corner Duran Bland has as many pick sixes as any Commanders receiver has receiving touchdowns. Russell Wilson versus the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have been shutting down quarterbacks all season, holding them to under 12 fantasy points per game. And buyer beware, Justin Herbert. Temper those expectations, people, against the Baltimore Ravens. A Ravens team that is allowing the fewest fantasy points per game this season, less than 10, and have been even better the last 4 weeks, allowing less than 8 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. At wide receiver, I have 2 must-start players for you this week. One, Michael Pittman against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's right, I am stacking Gardner Minshew and Pittman this week. Over the last 4 weeks, Pittman has seen 6 red zone targets, and guess what? He didn't even play last week, which is the 5th most over that time period. With Gardner Minshew, Pittman is one of just 5 wide receivers with at least a 20% target share in the 10 games so far this season. He's also produced 10 or more fantasy points in all but 1 game so far this season. This week against the Buccaneers, he faces a secondary that just allowed Brandon Ayuk to post 26 fantasy points thanks to 5 receptions that went for 156 yards. The last time that we saw Pittman was back in week 10. He saw a 46% target share while accounting for 46% air yardage share. Yeah, that's not bad. On the season, Tampa Bay is allowing over 40 fantasy points to wide receivers, and over the last 4 weeks, that number is closer to 43 fantasy points. My other must start is Odell Beckham Jr. against the lowly Chargers defense. With the loss of Mark Andrews, the Ravens will be looking for a veteran to step up. And while the Ravens' passing offense isn't known for big numbers, Beckham Jr. is coming off his first 100-yard game since that 2021 NFC Championship game. Odell has also seen at least 7 targets in 3 of the past 5 contests. After Andrews went down last week, he assumed a 39% target share. This season with Andrews, OBJ has seen just a 19.7 target per route run rate there with a 1.37 yards per route run average. But without him, that jumps up to 25.4% targets per route while averaging 2.99 yards per route run. Baltimore faces a Chargers defensive unit that is allowing over 41 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position and has allowed nearly 2,000 yards and 12 touchdowns to date. One more receiver that I like this week is Marquise Hollywood Brown. We all need something to be thankful for, so I am wishing this into existence here on Thanksgiving. After all, DK Metcalf against his Rams team holding 5 of 9 targets for 94 yards. Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, they combined for an additional 91 yards. What we saw at the start of last season is still there in this Cardinals offense, and I would expect the Cardinals to tap into it again this week against the Rams. So who do you sit? How about Garrett Wilson against the Dolphins? Going from Zach Wilson to Tim Boyle adds a new meaning to a Black Friday. Seattle may also have a new quarterback under center this week, or at best a banged-up Geno Smith against the 49ers. I'm fading Metcalf here in this contest, and I'm also avoiding Terry McLaurin against the Dallas Cowboys if I can. Deontay Banks and company held McLaurin to 5 for 43, and I'm not so confident in his abilities here against the Cowboys, who are allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Now moving along to the running back position, Derrick Henry has an opportunity to reestablish himself as one of the best backs in the league. Well, at least for this week against the Carolina Panthers team. A Carolina Panthers team that just allowed Tony Pollard to run for 61 yards on 12 carries, including a touchdown. Remember when we thought Tony Pollard was done? Not so fast against this Carolina defense. Carolina has been giving it up, and teams have been coming back for seconds. We're talking like 13 rushing touchdowns through 11 weeks and allowing running backs to average more than 28 fantasy points per game. If you can't start Henry this week against the Carolina Panthers, you probably can't even start him the rest of the season. Rachaad White is like a hot apple pie here on Thanksgiving. He's one of the hottest backs in all of fantasy. 4 scores over his last 3 games, 3 targets in every game this season but 1. He has also scored 15.9 fantasy points in 6 consecutive contests. Last week, 6 receptions for 28 yards. That's almost 9 fantasy points right there, without even including his touches in the run game. White is getting plenty of volume, and he's not only breaking ankles, but apparently he's tearing ACLs while he's at it. Another running back who's going to set the table this weekend is Isaiah Pacheco against a Raiders team that has allowed the 5th most fantasy points this season to running backs. What happens when you have too many cooks in the kitchen? You have to sit James Cook against the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, Isaiah Pacheco, he was fine against the Eagles last week, but I am not expecting a repeat performance here. I'm also sitting Javonte Williams versus the Cleveland Browns. The Browns sit top 10 when it comes to fantasy points allowed to the running back position. I'm also avoiding Alexander Madison against the Bears. Madison, he got the snap share there over Ty Chandler last week. I'm not even sure that matters against the Bears team that has allowed the fewest rushing yards over the last 4 weeks. And finally, when it rains on your turkey, you have foul weather. It's as simple as that. Or you could be talking about the tight end position so far this season and talk about tight ends that you trust. This week, there's one tight end that I really trust, and it's David Njoku, who has become a favorite target of rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Njoku has 8 or more targets in 4 of the previous 5 contests, including 15 targets last week. Heck, even Joe Flacco, who the Browns signed off the streets to their practice squad, he's a tight end guy. Expect Njoku to continue to be heavily targeted, especially down in the red zone, as he has been the last 5 weeks. These targets are going to add up to fantasy production. Start Dalton Schultz against the Jaguars, who are allowing top 10 fantasy production not only over the last 4 weeks, but over the entire season. Plus, CJ Stroud has hit Schultz for 5 touchdowns in the last 7 games. Over the last 4 weeks, the Colts have allowed the 10th most fantasy points to the tight end position. On the season, they have allowed the 5th most to the position. So if you need a tight end this week, you could do worse than Cade Otton. Now here are some tight ends that I have no problem sitting, and it starts with Tyler Higbee, who may be tempting with the Cooper Kupp injury, but the last time the Kupp was out, it was all about Puka Nacua. Better options are available, certainly options that are going to give you more than 1 catch and 17 yards. Hunter Henry is another hard fade for me this week as he faces a Giants team that is allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to tight ends this season. And the Patriots offense, it is an absolute mess that nobody should be touching. I don't even know if you could clean this up. Now, Logan Thomas, he did have 5 for 58, but unlike the Patriots, the Commanders had other options that the Giants had to concern themselves with. Oh, and sit Kyle Pitts. Apparently Desmond Ridder is back under center, and we all know what that means. Once again, this video is being recorded on Monday, so plenty can happen between now and Thursday's triple header there. So check out RotoBaller.com and the RotoBaller Discord channel for all the latest fantasy news. Also remember, only on Thanksgiving is it acceptable to give a family member the bird. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and hit that like button here on the RotoBaller YouTube channel to gobble up plenty more great fantasy football analysis.